We have gotten through 60 episodes, and the mountain keeps getting higher and higher that we can get to the top as we get to 100. Yes, 100. You thought that 50 was fast. Just wait, 100 is right around the corner, and it seems like it's coming like that, a snap of a finger. And again, I appreciate all the love and support. I've been getting a lot of feedback from our last episode with John and Tony, and we had CJ Harvey on as well. Been getting a lot of feedback from that. People actually coming up to me and saying, okay, who do you think is on your Mount Rushmore? And I flip the script. And I say, no, who's on your Mount Rushmore? So if you haven't already, go listen to that. John Antonic was a great interview, gave a lot of stories, a lot of back history, as well as WVU's basketball history, as well as the 1942 team. So if you know how to get a hold of John, tell him to write that book. I'm just saying he needs to write the book. But without further ado, let's get right into this. And first off, I want to give a special shout out to U92, the Moose up here in Morgantown. Alex Wiederspiel is a good friend of mine. I reached out to him and said, hey, I got this podcast and I would love for it to go out on a different airwave. So I know we are now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. But I said, can I go on a different airwave, meaning the radio? And he said, absolutely. So if you're up in Morgantown or you listen to u92themoose.com, you can listen to this episode as well as future episodes on u92themoose.com, or just check your local listings up here in Morgantown, and I'm sure you'll be able to find U92 as well. Well, again, thank you all for listening to this, however you may be listening or watching to this program. And again, we have a terrific episode for you guys today. Let me go right into this, because this is my guest today. She wore so many different hats. And what I mean by hats is she played basketball. She was a politician. She was actually the first lady Mountaineer in WVU history. And there's only been one other one, and that was back in 2009. But man, I'm excited for this. Very approachable. I'm very excited for this as well. But without further ado, let's welcome in Miss Natalie Tennant. Natalie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. There's so much. I'm like, there's so much we can talk about. Like you just hit off John Antonic. There's actually a book. You cannot see it in there. It might have been even one of his first books that I'm going to sneak over. I know this is not what you do, but this is, Bring on the Mountaineers.
Yeah.
Oh no, Kevin Keyes. I'm wrong. There's another book that my dad has. This is Kevin Keyes, and must be Shelley Poe. But we have a John Antonic book, so I'm sorry, I was mistaken, but that got me all excited because he's like Mr. Historian of West Virginia University sports. And it's so nice that we have someone like that who's keeping up with everything. So, okay, go ahead.
No, absolutely. No, I agree with you. Just sitting here, I'm just like, she's so right. And it's so true as well, because there needs to be more people like that. That way they can continue to push content to represent not only the athletic side of WVU, but also the athletic side of the state as well. So that's why this podcast was created, just to sort of focus on basketball, since basketball is so rich. And as I said as well, our guest, Natalie Tennant, was also a basketball player back in high school from 1982 to 1986 at North Marion High School. So we're going to go talk about that. We're going to talk about getting WVU, becoming the first lady Mountaineer, her journalism career. Yes, she was a journalist. We'll go into that. And then we'll sort of touch on politics as well. But let's go right into it. And Natalie, I'll lead off with this. So from the time that you played, well, actually, let's start from the beginning. Where did this love for basketball originate from? You grew up on a farm. You eventually went on to play at North Marion. Where did this love for basketball come from?
I was just a sports person. I am the youngest of 7 children, and I only have one sister who's 7 years older than I am. So my contemporaries, you would say, would be my brothers, who are immediately ahead of me. And I was a tomboy. So to be able to have somebody to play with, I had to play with my brothers, with my sister being so much older. And we played on the farm, and really basketball, there weren't a whole lot of options. Back in the 80s. I hate to talk like this because it just makes it sound so old, but it's true. I mean, there weren't as many options. Basketball was kind of accepted. I tried to play, I played t-ball a little bit. We didn't have t-ball. I was on the B team. I didn't make the A team of baseball up at Fairview. And so that that was it. I mean, what else, what other sport was a tomboy kid like me going to do? So basketball was it, and track. I take that back. And for middle school, I can remember wanting to run track when they had just consolidated North Marion High School. I think people will remember this was like 79 that they consolidated 5 schools: Fairview, Mannington, Barrackville, Farmington, and Monongah. And so we had just consolidated. I was going into middle school and I wanted to run track, and they wouldn't let a 6th grader run track. So my first sporting things were track. And then we finally got a basketball team in 8th grade, which then led on to North Marion. And that's what I did because, farm girl, I didn't play tennis and I didn't run cross country because basketball season back in the 80s was in the fall for girls. So that was a whole lot different because it was in the fall.
You had mentioned that you grew up on a farm. Again, I think this is so unique because somebody that grew up on a farm, eventually played basketball in the 8th grade. Did you have a different kind of grit and fire from just growing up on a farm, being the youngest of 7, and just applying that to the basketball court? Could you sort of see that growing up?
I think so. I think that could be a good analogy. Because if you wanted to do things, and that was, I always wanted to be out and about. I didn't know that they called it FOMO back then. I didn't know it was called FOMO back in the 80s. Fear of missing out. That's the newest term that everyone uses now. And I think that I had that because we didn't get out as much. In the summertime, I said goodbye to my friends and then saw them maybe then when school started back up again, maybe once or twice in the summer at the Fairview 4th of July celebration or the Mannington Fair. And so, we were a little bit more remote, and we did our playing and our activities and our fun up on the farm. And I had to be creative with how I practiced basketball or what I was able to do. I mean, I can, we had no blacktop, so there were no blacktop places to dribble the ball. I remember dribbling the basketball up and down the small little sidewalk that we had from the house to the wash house, like a farm wash house. So I would dribble that back and forth. I would go down in the basement and pass the ball against the wall of an unfinished basement. And then maybe about my sophomore or junior year, my dad was, he was a high school principal at rival high school, Fairmont Senior. And way back, because my brother one brother is 12 years older, one's 10, and he welded them. They both were kickers in high school. He welded them a field goal post. So I'm like, hey, I need a basketball hoop. So there is, and it's still there 30 some years later. So yeah, I guess you had to, you can't really feel sorry for yourself. And the thing is, basketball wasn't that big of a deal in the 80s. It wasn't in North Marion anyway. It wasn't focused as much on. And so I was just as equal as probably any other girl that, we all played. You only played basketball when you went to practice and you had a game. You didn't have as much opportunity. I did get to go to a few camps later on in my high school career. And I'm hopeful that people know the reputation and the records and the accolades that the North Marion girls basketball team has now, because that means we've come so far. Because my freshman year, we won one basketball game. The year before, they hadn't won any. So, it's good to be, I always say, I'm part of that foundation that helped so many state championships come out of North Marion.
Yeah, the foundation was laid back then in the 80s.
Yeah. It was so. And it was just different too, because girls basketball was almost like a carry on. That's not the word I'm looking for. I don't know if it was an afterthought or not, because remember, it was played in the fall. And the fall, what do you think about the fall as we start up the fall and school starting now? We think about football, right? And so, fall and then girls basketball, we didn't get as much publicity or talked about as much. And I can remember the debates that they would have. This is even after I graduated North Marion, after high school. They'd be like, oh, we can't have girls basketball in the wintertime, because people were pushing for it. Like, this is when we should have it. And this would give more focus to what girls are doing. And there were people like, no, we shouldn't have girls playing, and it'll take away from the boys season. And we see that it hasn't, and it's just lifted it up.
When you look at the level of competition that you guys had, I mean, you mentioned how you guys won one game back in '82, but the level of competition, especially at the girls basketball level through the years, especially recently, has been tremendous. What was that like for you, going up against different girls basketball teams growing up in high school?
There were some really good ones. Morgantown and University were always the toughest, and we could never make it out of the regionals or the sectionals. For some reason, Philip Barber comes to mind, being tough because we lost 110-15 one time. Fairmont Senior, they we were kind of equal with them. East Fairmont was pretty good at the time, and I think about, I'm thinking about all the great girls basketball players that we have now, but really they were built from like the Monique Tarantinis. I think that's how you pronounce her last name, from Morgantown, the Parkersburg mayor. There's awards named after some of these women, and it's like, wow. So when the current girls basketball players are being awarded awards named after 30 years ago players, so that's always a plus. So it wasn't as Morgantown, they were always one of the toughest and always going to the state championship, state playoffs.
When you look at what girls basketball was for you, wherever you played, compared to now, how have you sort of seen it grow over the years?
That's a great point. It has grown tremendously over the years. I think the stepping up from making it a fall sport to making it a winter sport, to show, oh, look, girls are playing and they're good. Had I had an AAU girls basketball team, I mean, would I have been on it? I would hope that I would have been on it, not had to play B team baseball with the boys. But then would I have been able to get to all the practices, to get to the travel ball and things like that? So I think, there's so much travel ball that takes place now that, basketball is year round. And it has to be. I mean, you would, to be able to compete, for me to be able to compete, I would have to be year round. And so I think of that often. For me, sports was something that I love to do. It was there were few opportunities, but part of me, I wasn't a bad girls basketball player. I could have been a whole lot better, had, little extra training or little extra work. I'd go to some summer camps, but that was part of the reason I went to WVU too, because I was like, I had Fairmont State. You have a few choices also. I could go to WVU if I got in, Fairmont State, and I had gone to student council camps at West Virginia Wesleyan, and I just loved that campus and thought that would be a cool place to go. Little did I know how much it cost. But anyway, I just said to myself, you know what, if I tried to walk on or try out for basketball at WVU in college, I wanted West Virginia across my chest. So that was kind of like, that just did it for me too. Little did I know that I'd be having a buckskin across my chest representing West Virginia and representing the state. So I've seen it grow. And I think about, I follow somebody, there's a young woman who's her last name Bordas. I know her dad up in Wheeling. And it's like, when you follow these kids on Twitter, it's like, oh my goodness. And they're going to this camp and they're going to this tournament. And, it's just, it's a lot of commitment, and it's a lot of time and money that goes into it.
You had mentioned the social media aspect of how the game of basketball has grown, especially for girls basketball. Do you think if social media was still growing during the time that you were playing in high school, there could have been a different shift in the tide, meaning girls basketball would have been playing in the winter while you were playing compared to the fall. Could you sort of see similarities to that? Sort of walk me through the social media aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. And you're better known. I mean, think about how you get recruited, or how they even try to recruit or get sportscasters to vote on Heisman. They would send out. I can remember being in the newsroom and our sports guys getting paraphernalia about a football player, like vote for him for, Dave. You guys probably know Dave Weekly. He's a well-known sports guy in West Virginia. And I think he still is a Heisman voter. And he would get all kind of things. So, that's back in the 80s and 90s and 2000. Now it's, you're just sending a link like here, or you're putting it right there and it's popping up in front of my face every time I'm scrolling down. So I think that would, and maybe that's why we're seeing girls basketball be so strong now, is that you can get on that equal level through social media. Look at the perfect example. I say we're on equal level. No, we're not, because look at the NCAA women's basketball tournament this last year and the men's basketball tournament. And when that player, I can't remember where she was from, she walked in, and what did she do? She videotaped the weight room for the girls' NCAA national championship tournament. And it was like a bench press and a few weights compared to the plushness. So that did change some things because of social media. We're all able to forward this on or share this link or talk about it. So we are seeing the positive of it, but that's a great example of, we have a whole lot more to go to.
What advice would you give a young woman, student athlete that's wanting to just continue to do what they love to do, being from a small town? I know you're from Farmington, but just what advice would you give somebody like that?
Use any opportunity that you can. I mean, fortunately, for North Marion, we had activity buses even back in the 80s. I know that there are some schools, even in West Virginia, where they don't have an activity bus, and how important that is to be able to get back home. Like if your school's out, you got to go on the bus. But if there's an activity bus, it's going to take you home at 5:30, then take advantage of that. You can do all those things. You can't just say, I don't have a blacktop area to shoot around. I don't have the facilities. You can always get a basketball in your hand. And this was Glading Barner was the head basketball coach. And then like my sophomore, junior year, Gary Kendall came along, and he was the baseball coach. He was an assistant, but he was our assistant basketball coach. But he was like, always hold it when you're watching TV, always hold a ball in your hand. If you don't have a basketball, doing this all the time, just hold a baseball. He was a baseball coach, and he's like, I just always have a ball in my hand. So you're always getting that feel for it. So, it's hard to hold a phone and scroll while you're trying to hold a basketball, but hey, hold the basketball in your weaker hand, your less dominant hand. And that's one way to do it. Find somebody that'll just pass back and forth with you and learn the basics. And that's what I think too. It's like, we got to have the basic fundamentals. Gosh, I sound like a coach, or I sound like an old person. You have to have the fundamentals. Like you have to, pass a ball, a chest pass correctly, bounce pass correctly. You can do those things. I mean, that's what I did against a cement wall in a wet, damp basement of our house.
I love that, because you found different resources and you use those to just get better. And I love that aspect of it as well. But so I got to ask this then. So that'll lead me into this question. What was your go-to move in high school?
Oh, geez. I didn't have a my go-to move was diving for the ball, and I wore knee pads. I mean, that was always my go-to move, because I was aggressive, hustler, defensive player. I was always kicking the ball. I was always trying to steal I mean, there might have been one game where I fouled out in the first quarter against Fairmont Senior. I mean, aggressive was my go-to move, which sometimes benefited me and sometimes didn't.
Did you ever get thrown out of a game?
No, but
Fouled out?
My freshman, oh heck, I fouled out. Yeah, lots. I mean, you got 5 of them. Why not use them, right? Um, I'll tell you, my freshman year, like because you come in and when you're young, you're dumb, and you don't know what you can and can't do. So I can remember, and isn't it wild, like how we can remember? I guess I can remember some good TV story, but you always remember sports stories. You always remember games, maybe because it was your first. So I did not start my first game my freshman year, which is by all rights. You're a freshman. You got to earn it. But I started my second game my freshman year because I got in there and I was aggressive. And, I wasn't as, polished as I could be and should be, because while I had confidence on defense, I didn't have a lot of confidence on offense. Like I didn't know if I was going to make a basket or not make a basket. And I can remember going after a ball, and Lisa Barksdale, I had a friend who was a referee, Doug Leketic. And he would ref all kind of games. And one time I was going for a ball, and Lisa Barksdale from Fairmont Senior, my dad's high school, remember, he's the principal. We were like going for a ball, and like somehow we step up, and I'm 5'3.5", and she's about 6 foot. And somehow we stand up, and I look at her, and she grabs me by the neck. And I turn around like, Doug, the referee. So, I mean, and then I can remember the next day, people were like, oh, Natalie, I hear you're a lover and not a fighter. Like, I wasn't gonna fight her. I wish I could see her now. I don't know if she's still around, but and we play 2 games against people a year. So I'm sure I had and that was at home. So Fairmont Senior, and I think we beat them, and they beat us there. We were always on the edge of barely winning and not winning.
That story you just said almost sounds like the Sharks and the Jets from West Side Story. You're just like, I better not see you out in the street next time, because you better watch out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was me. Like I was, if I had all rights to go for a ball, I would go for a ball. And it was just, I feel sorry for my parents who had to watch, because they knew I loved basketball and I loved the game. And I'd like to talk about how important sports is for people, girls and boys. But my poor parents would have to watch, and they'd see us get blown out. And there was one time, it was up at North Marion, and when you have girls games, especially in the fall, about 20 people come at the most, and 15 of them are parents. So one time I was going for the ball, and it went out of bounds. And I'd missed it, but I ran to get it, off in an empty gym area. And I come back, and I have to stand beside this stands. And my mom whispers over to me. She's like, come on, Butterfingers. Like I'm getting grief from my own fans, from my own ball. And I was like, yeah, because I should have had that ball. She's like, come on, Butterfingers.
Why does that sound like my mom? I mean, that sounds like my mom too.
But you know what, though? It goes into what I wanted to say. Like, so obviously, especially when the youngest have 7 children, there are no favorites in the family. So you might as well just be realistic with the kid. Come on. But that's what's good about sports, is that you lose a game. What do you have to do? You got to get up and go to practice, because you played on a Tuesday. You're going to play on a Thursday for the next game. And I think that's certainly the attitude that I have had with me my whole life. And I think especially from girls basketball, because I love the game so much. We lost all the time, but I was still going to get out there, and I was still going to play the game. And so my point to that is, that's what boys and girls need. Like that's what girls need, especially because they have to be, because boys just get it all the time. When I was growing up, we didn't have as many opportunities to go and fail. Like people have to learn how to fail and enjoy failing sometimes, because then you get up and you get going the next time. I mean, that's happened for me in elections publicly. I've failed a lot publicly, and you just have to know that there's always the next game in a sense. And I think that that's the mindset that I have is, all right, I'm going to go practice for the next game that I may or may not win.
So you mentioned the much bigger picture, and that's what people with sports. But let's go back down to basketball, and especially in this great state with 1.8 million people. When you look at the game of basketball and its importance, both boys and girls to this state, just walk me through what you see that's important that just makes everybody just come together and just sort of not really unite, but just find that common ground. And they just fall in love with it all over again.
Yeah, I mean, that's like this is so wild that we're talking about basketball right now because we're in the football mode. We're in the fall sports mode. Heck, I mean, cross country, soccer. We didn't have a girls soccer team. So for you to talk about basketball, I'm getting in my basketball mode. People will be like, "What's your favorite sport?" Sport. I'm like, well, whatever season we're in. So I'm working on soccer and football, and I got a nephew's going to be running cross country, so I'll get into that. But I think what's so special about basketball, and I can relate some of my Mountaineer experience with it too. When I became the Mountaineer first woman, some people didn't like it. They told me to go back to the kitchen. During football season, I was still getting a rough time from even our own fans. But when basketball season happens, you are coming together. And it's like, I didn't get the grief that I got during basketball season for a couple reasons. One, they saw that I wasn't going to quit. I didn't quit. I was still, I made it through football season. I was going to be the Mountaineer for basketball season. So there's one reason. Two, you're in a more intimate atmosphere. We're all together under one roof. We're not out there tailgating, doing all kind of different things. And so I think that's what's special about basketball too. And it's in the wintertime and it's freezing cold and you're coming into a hot, sticky gym. So that there are coliseums. So that's great. And three, for the Mountaineer thing, there is not as much tailgating during basketball season as there is during football season. So people are in their real frame of mind then. But think about this for the basketball. Don't we love March Madness? And basketball just brings us together, whether WV or Marshall's in it, right? That one year, a couple years ago, when they played against each other, that was really awesome.
Yep.
So I think that's what makes it is because there's just a more intimacy to it. I heard it said one time, who are the most athletic athletes? What would it be? Football, you have skilled positions. Basketball, you do have to play every position. Yeah, you might be a big man, but you're still got to dribble the ball. You still have to have some skills to be able to move around and do things. So basketball, you got to be able to play offense and defense, where football, maybe you're just offense, maybe you're just defense. So, that's another reason. I think that people think that, I can play basketball. We could go out back and shoot it. I don't have to be great. How many people go out back and run a football route? So that's why basketball, everybody plays horse or everybody plays cat. So that's another reason why basketball brings us together.
I could assume just by the way you were talking about the fundamentals earlier, I thought in my head, I'm glad you brought it up. I assume you're a great horse and cat player.
Well, remember, I'm a better
That's not a good start to that answer, Natalie. That's not a good start at all.
Yes, exactly. I am. Before I got on this call.
Before I got on this call, I just finished my first game of horse in about 2 days. I'm about ready to go back out. We're going to play cat later before dinner. Yeah. It's all good.
No. I told my husband, I'm like, this is a really interesting podcast that I'm going to be on. He's going to ask me about playing basketball at North Marion, when it was not cool to play basketball, wasn't that cool to be in sports. And I said, wonder how good I should say I was. Let me remember how good I was.
Brag about yourself. Just come on. I brag about myself. Who doesn't?
No, you can't, the reporter in me comes out like, somebody's going to be able to go find the facts. They'll get the receipts. All they got to do is go look in the old North Marion yearbooks and be like, oh, this was your record. You guys really weren't that good, Natalie. Like, no, I just got some good stories.
Hey, that's the best part about this podcast is whenever people tell stories, it just unlocks a lot of different things. So I like that. But let's talk about becoming the Lady Mountaineer. So before you even accepted the position, or you were even accepted as being this in this role, just sort of walk me through, had you always found yourself as this, high-spirited, energetic, enthusiastic individual that just saw potential for being the Mountaineer?
Yes. And remember, it comes with an attitude of basketball too. And it actually, like, I just, as you were like going through this whole thing, I was like, you know what? Being the Mountaineer goes back, can be rooted in girls basketball in the fall. Because if I wouldn't have been, because girls basketball was in the fall, I had the opportunity to be super dog. North Marion Huskies, I was super dog. I can remember Bobby Mormon was the cheerleading coach at North Marion. She came to me and she's like, Natalie, because I was bespirited. I was student body president. I was in the band. So like I tried to fit all of I'm telling you, FOMO was at its highest when I was in, maybe no, not in its highest, but it was very high. I wanted to be in everything because I did what I saw my older siblings do. They were all in the band, but they had kind of dropped out by the time they were a senior in high school. Then, just being in sports, like these were the activities that we had that we could do. And then also that I knew was feasible in my family. Well, if my sister and brothers were in the band, then I was going to be allowed to be in the band. So I was in the band, but I was student body president. My sister was the first and last girl student body president at Fairview High School because they consolidated. So I followed a lot of the example that my siblings had set. So those were why I felt I could ask my parents, can I do this? They did it. So I was in the band. I was student body president. Bobby Mormon comes to me and she's like, you know what? We're thinking about, we want to have a mascot. Would you want to be the mascot, the North Marion mascot? I was like, yeah. And I can't remember. And I was like, I think my mom can make an outfit, a fun fur outfit as super dog. So my mom kind of came up with the SD on my chest and a cape. And Bobby Mormon had one stipulation that I could not do as the husky dog. Think about what a dog does that you cannot do in public.
Probably pee on a fire hydrant.
You got it. I cannot hike my leg. That's what she told me. She said, you cannot hike your leg.
Oh my goodness.
I never even thought of it. I was like, okay. My mom made this. I was super dog. Being raised on a farm, we have this area where they drag the dead cattle. I trekked up there, got a big cow bone. It was big. Painted it silver because when you're a mascot, everything has to be exaggerated. Mm-hmm. So painted it silver. So I had a big, I've lost the name of what I called it. I was super dog and it was
like a wand.
No, it was a big bone. It was a cow bone.
Oh, okay.
It was as big as my arm, but I called it the dog something. I'll have to think of it what I call the bone. So I had all of this. And the only reason, so then, there were however many football games there are, 10 football games, maybe not even that many back then, 8 or 10 football games. So because girls basketball did not play on a Friday night, you couldn't play on Friday night because boys were playing football. I was able to be super dog. So I was this super dog in the fall. But then come basketball season for boys basketball, I was super dog and I could be it full time because I didn't have girls basketball. So at that time, I got better actually at basketball by being super dog because during the halftime or quarter breaks, I would get out in the middle of the court and dribble between my legs and do all these fun things as super dog. My face was covered. Nobody knew who I was. They thought I was a boy being able to dribble. I'd shoot half court shots. And actually, Fairmont Senior, another game. I'm just trying to pull out all these names for people to remember. Bill Ferguson was the head basketball coach at Fairmont Senior. We were at the Armory playing. So that was big rivalries. The boys were, big rivals, great team. It was halftime. It was neck and neck, and we're on their court, and I'm super dog, and I'm playing it, and we'd always try to see if I could make a half court shot. Well, I got up there, I shot the ball. It went through. I made the half court shot. At that same time, Fairmont Senior's head basketball coach was walking by. The ball goes down, it like hits him on the shoulder. And because he was my dad's school, he's like, oh man, I came out. I knew we were in trouble when the mascot was hitting me with a half court shot. So those are some of my good stories as super dog. So with that being said, to get back to your point, I wouldn't have been the Mountaineer had I not been super dog. I wouldn't have been super dog if girls basketball hadn't been played in the fall. So I can't complain too much. So you see how it all stacks up there. And I can remember going to orientation with my mom at WVU, and she's like, oh, if the Mountaineer had like a fun sidekick of a hound dog or something, you could do that. So that was the thought. That was the fleeting thought my freshman year of being the mascot at West Virginia University. And then by the time, having been involved in things, I ran for student body vice president at WVU. We did not win, but having been involved in different activities, sorority and student government and things like that, by the time my senior year, I changed my major. So I was going to be a fifth year senior. They were saying that there was going to be tryouts for the Mountaineer and that you should try out, Natalie. So I wrote down my essay, I answered questions, I went and interviewed in front of the Mountain Honorary Committee, and had the tryout. So that's just what led to it, because I had this experience and confidence of being super dog.
Well, as you can tell by my notepad, I wrote b-ball or basketball, needless to say. But the point is, everything just revolves around basketball with this story today.
Yeah, but and that's what I keep saying. Like, if you have a young child, boy or girl, who wants to get into sports, let them get in. I mean, make sure that they're committed for the whole season, whether they get to play or not, or whether, like, I'm not one who allows for quitting. It's like, you said you wanted to do this, you're going to do this. But it comes around to the same thing, into politics, into broadcasting. Remember, I did MSN. Well, I had to be, when was I, 20, from the 90s, from 2000, I guess. No, earlier than that, 94 to like 2000 or 2000 something, 2003, I think. I was part of MSN and worked with Tony and Hoppy. We did the video things, and I was a reporter, because I was a television reporter too. But having that love of sports and the love of basketball, it does open up a lot of things.
So walk me through this. You sort of mentioned what that tryout was like, but walk me through your first time truly as the Mountaineer. This is after you had your tryout in front of the crowds, getting everybody hyped up. Walk me through that very first time you ran out onto the field as the Mountaineer.
Oh, well, I mean, the tryout, you were in the outfit, and there you found, I found the sense, and the university realized the sense of some people not liking a girl Mountaineer. And so that was the first, I was told to go back to the kitchen, go make babies. That was even at the tryouts. So then even once I was named the Mountaineer, there were letters to the editor. People were already hyped up. They were trying to, and sometimes it helps to be a little, and same in playing basketball, not knowing, a little dense. I didn't realize that that's probably what people were trying to do, give me a hard time so I would quit. And that was never in my thought. So that was all that spring, being the Mountaineer, you kind of make the official Passover at the spring game from the old Mountaineer to the new Mountaineer. And now we have an official rifle passing ceremony that's been around for probably, it could be 20 years. It's been 30 some years since I was the Mountaineer. So 20 some years for the official thing. So then in the summertime, though, I was still the Mountaineer. Like, I was still doing things. We had, West Virginia Day celebrations. We had all kind of fairs and festivals and things that I would go as the Mountaineer. So the first day, on that first game, there'd always been all of this brouhaha. They didn't like the girl Mountaineer. And I was trying to, get in shape. So I lived really close to the stadium. I would go to the stadium and run the steps sometimes and try to be in shape. And that first game, when they say bring on the Mountaineer, like I didn't know how the football team was going to accept this female Mountaineer, this girl Mountaineer. And the fear that every Mountaineer has, and if they say they don't, they're not telling the truth. But I think we're all would agree, like, you want to make sure that gun goes off. Like there's always a possibility that, the cap could fall off, that something could have gotten wet, the black powder's not going to go off. So that was my first, like that's your first fear, like running across the field. How bad would it be when they say bring on the Mountaineers and there's no smoke ablaze because the gun didn't go off? So those are like, that's the prayer that you say, like, please let the gun go off. Please let the gun go off. And for me, I was ahead. I didn't know what the football team, and this was a real concern that I had. Would they try to run me over? Would they try to, make an example of the girl Mountaineer? So I shot the gun off. It went, and I was out ahead of them, and ran clear across the field, clear to the end of that quarter where the cheerleaders are down on that end too. And after the game, I asked my friends, I'm like, oh, how did it look? Was it good? I mean, the gun got off. I shot it off. They were like, yeah, but you took off and you looked like you were running from the team. Off, and I was like, I don't care. I just wanted to show that I could be out in front. So, and there's like no better feeling than that. When they say, let's bring on the Mountaineers, who's doing it? Who's bringing on the Mountaineers but the Mountaineer? And it's like that, like there's nothing better than that. I mean, to be in that buckskin, is just an awesome feeling.
You had mentioned that you guys do the annual passing of the rifle ceremony.
Yeah.
My question is, describe this Mountaineer family, the people that are the Mountaineer mascots. What's that like for you being a part of that family?
That's a great way to put it. It really is a family. And when I say, we are very open and honest with each other. Like we will admit, yeah, I got scared at that time, or, oh, that was the best feeling in the world. And there's like, I'll always have your back. There's just that feel like, I know I could call up any of the Mountaineers, the ones I know really well, the ones that, I only get to see at the reunions, but there is always that feel of, we know what each other has gone through. And I will always have your back. And that's just a great feel. Like the Mountaineer that I would say, it's so funny. I just saw Michael Garcia about 2 weeks ago. He was the Mountaineer. I think he got it. And here's so funny. He interned for me. This is what I like about Michael Garcia. He interned for me in the Secretary of State's office in 2013. He had already tried out for the Mountaineer once and did not get it. And so, like, I don't know if he thought he was going to get some good vibes and positive vibes by applying and being in the Secretary of State's office. But that, I would just I'm like, you got to try again, learn from any of the questions that they ask or things like that. And 2013 was the sesquicentennial, the big 150th birthday of West Virginia. And there was the big celebrations, like 2 or 3 nights in a row, where they had these great fireworks and this animation on the Capitol, and he was there. And we finished one night with all the celebration, the fireworks, and like everybody's just so proud and hipped and high off of that. And then I hear this, let's go. And of course, I know what to say, Mountaineers. And it's Michael Garcia leading the way. And I'm like, that kid's going to get it to be the Mountaineer this year. He's going to get it. That just gave me goosebumps because I just felt it right then that he had tried before and didn't get it. He was going to get it. So I'm close to him. I'm close to Brandon Flower, and I can't. And why is that? Like, we've just been like Brandon Flower is just this personable guy. We had daughters that are the same age. I text him all the time, like, hey, when are we doing this? Where's that? Like, he has to keep me in line. I see him at soccer games. Um, Fairmont Senior would beat Charleston Catholic in the finals. They're always two good rivals. And then Scott Moore, there's three of us from Marion County, and Scott Moore, like they will tell me, like, Scott Moore's like, yeah, I saw you when I was in the 5th grade. And I'm like, thank you for that. So it's me, Scott Moore, and Michael Garcia from Marion County. Then you have like the Ritchie County contingency of Ed Harris and Rock Wilson, who came after I did, who tried out like 2 or 3 times and didn't get it. And then the guy wouldn't give it up. He was Mountaineer for 3 years in a row. And so, it's like we can tease, we can do that. And then Brock Burwell is Rock's nephew. So it's a family, real family, and then the Mountaineer family also.
So I would feel guilty if I didn't bring him up. But the current Mountaineer, Colston Glover, who is a Lewisburg native, what do you like about him as being the Mountaineer?
Well, here's the problem. I haven't had a chance to really get to know him as well, because we haven't had as many things in person.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about him is that he stuck through it. I'm glad that he got to be the Mountaineer again, because I've had this back and forth that I only thought that you should get to be the Mountaineer for 1 year. It's such a prestigious job that you should only get it for 1 year. Like, they were allowing it for 2 years. They cut it down to 2 years. And so I'm glad that they extended that for him. And for Brooke, she is from North Marion, and she's the alternate. So I don't know if she'll get to try out again, if she's going to graduate or not, but I like his perseverance, and I'm getting to see more and more things that he's done, that he's getting to do with social media. That's how I get to follow him.
Again, if people did not know the general topic or theme of this podcast, everything revolves around basketball and social media.
Yeah.
But
and that's it. I mean, it does, like, the basketball just gave me a comfortability. Like, I don't know. I mean, you have to be around it in a sense. Like, here's what I would have too. Oh, there was this, I mean, and I will talk to anybody. Like, people will call me or email me. This is back in the early days of email. I had a young woman from WVU who wanted to know about, should she try out for the Mountaineer? What could she do? Could I have any advice for her? So I tried to give advice, and she's like, we're going to have the requirements and the questions and the interviews. And then the cheer off game is the UConn game. That's back when we were big in the Big East. So she wrote me that, and she's like, the game, then the cheer off will be the UConn game. So I looked at that and I wrote her back, and I said, and this is what I tell anyone for anything, but especially being the Mountaineer, you have to have a genuine reason. Like, people want to say that, oh, Natalie was just the Mountaineer to prove a point that girls could do it. No, I would have failed miserably if I thought that. But if you have a genuine reason for doing something, you're going to be more successful. I had the resume. I was super dog. Come on, folks. So I was, I had the school spirit. I had the sports knowledge and the sports understanding, because when she wrote me, I wrote back to her and I said, be genuine, understand, this is what you really want to do, understand the game, and know what the other schools are. UConn is spelled UConn. She had spelled it YUKON. So I was like, she didn't get it. But she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I meant UConn, University of Connecticut. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of tough on people too. I got my own mother who would say, let's go, Butterfinger. So, I mean, that's what I kind of tell people.
Now, did Rebecca Durst, whenever she was becoming the Mountaineer in 2009, did she approach you and saying, hey, I'm interested in doing this, I would love your help? Did she ever approach you?
She did. She wanted to know, should she do it? I think she was like she knew she wanted to do it. Like, she already had it on, like knew what she was going to, and like just had, very much prepared for it. And one thing that I'm very protective of the Mountaineer, of the muzzle loader, of the outfit. And there have been times where people are like, hey, we're doing this special presentation or this project at my school. Like a teacher will contact me. Could we use your Mountaineer outfit? And I just tell them no. I mean, no, because I would bring it. I would have to be your special presentation and I would bring it and show it. I don't want anybody else wearing it, except when it comes to tryouts. I think there were 2 girls maybe when Rebecca tried out. And so they desperately needed a girl size outfit because I was wearing Ben White's, who was like 6'2" and had to roll everything up. And then I finally got one that fit me. So I did let the university use it. Like I didn't let an individual use it. I let the university use it, and they had asked me for it. So yeah, I'm kind of tough like that. I just don't want someone wearing it. Like, can I wear it for a Halloween costume? No, you can't. Especially the Halloween parties. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. But I think my favorite part of the Mountaineer is, one, it's a symbol of the state, but 2, you guys had some awesome photos back in the day. I mean, whenever you walk into the downtown library, you go up to where they have that little area for J. Rockefeller. If you walk in, if you go to the right, up the stairs, they have a quiet room. But on the left, they have a glass case with a ton of Mountaineer photos. I'll tell you what, those vintage photos of the Mountaineers are by far some of the coolest photos I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, and
creative.
Like the people before me, like even Matt, I was just on a Zoom with him. Zervis, he's got some cool pictures too. And they do have, plus they're like 70s and 80s looking guys who already had long hair because that was the style in the 70s and 80s, but then Brock Burwell, like he let his hair grow out. He worked in the Secretary of State's office for a couple years. So, you have good people who are just the Mountaineer. I mean, we just know, and we have a respect for it. And I think the respect then comes in all other aspects of our life too.
Yeah, I'm currently looking at photos of Brock, and I think Brock was one of my more favorite Mountaineers during my lifespan. I'm only 21, so I've had a number of them, but Brock was very into it.
Well, and he was a big guy. Like he slimmed down. He's not at his playing weight anymore. He's way slimmed down. His hair is cut. He looked like the COVID Mountaineer.
The COVID Mountaineer. That is clever. I like that.
Before we knew what COVID was, like he had the hair that he hadn't cut for years, and probably had the COVID diet going on. But yeah, he was a big guy. And
now I will admit I had the COVID hair because my brother. So back in last April, my brother walked up to me and he said, "Okay, I got an idea. I need your opinion." So it was like very secretive because my mom is very protective of us with cutting our own hair. So he came up to me and he said, "So I got this idea, and I think I might just shave off all my hair." And I looked at him, I'm like, "You're gonna do what? Are you trying to make mom die?" And he's just like, "I think I might do it. I need your help." And I said, "Okay, fine." So not knowing how my mom would react, we go out on the back porch while she's watching TV, and she sees that I have a razor in my hand, and she's like, "What are you doing with that?" And I looked at her, I'm like, "Do you want to know? Do you really want to know?" And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm gonna go shave Ryan's head." And she's like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen right now." So we do that, and my brother looked at me and he said, "Well, now you got to do it." And I said, "No, not really. I'm okay." And he's like, "No, you should do it." And I said, "No." Next night, he walks up to me and he says, "So have you thought about it?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Okay." So I sat there. I'm just like, I do need a haircut. So the COVID hairstyle got to me. I told him, I said, "You can do this one time and one time only." Went downstairs, and my mom almost passed out because whenever I walked back in, I said, "Here, touch my head." And she's just like, "No, just go upstairs. I'm not talking to you. We're done. We're done." So yeah, that if you were to ask me Did you experience a COVID hairstyle? Yes, I did.
The reverse COVID hairstyle. Wow.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
have you had a haircut since?
Oh, I have. I've had multiple. She said, you better hope and pray to God that your hair grows back. If not, we're gonna buy the chia product that you see like the commercials. And she says, we will make sure both of your guys' hairs come back. And I said, okay, fine.
Oh, that's funny.
So there's your story. You've been providing me with
Exactly.
stories. I gotta give you a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I like that.
So I would, again, I would feel guilty if I didn't lead into this, and that is the politics side of, well, the journalist and politics side of you, and we can just combine the two since we're slowly running out of time. But when you look at both of those, and going back to not only basketball but also being the Mountaineer, having that competitive spirit, being enthusiastic for what you're passionate about, could you see similarities between what you did growing up and then applying that into professional and real world situations?
Yeah, that's a good analogy too, but definitely because I mean, think about what my original statement was. I wanted to, if I played basketball, I wanted to represent West Virginia. So that moved on in being a television reporter. You went all over the state. People remember me, at Channel 12, WBOY, and then down in Charleston, where my husband and I anchored the morning news together. And then I had the opportunity, like that's how I learned. Like when I was the Mountaineer, I did travel around the state a lot. I can remember my mom and dad taking me to places. And at one time I remember, I knew we were on this road like this and I was asleep. I was asleep in the back seat, back even before we had to do seat belts. And then we got there and I woke up and I'm at Twin Falls State Park in Wyoming County. So I'd had that experience as the Mountaineer traveling around the state. Then as a television reporter, all over North Central West Virginia, my first job covering the stories and telling the stories, some bad, some good, but promoting West Virginia, just telling our stories. And then at Channel 8 in Charleston, having the opportunity, I was the travel reporter. I did Traveling West Virginia. So there was all the cool and fun stuff of getting to go around promoting the state. You promote your school by having your name. I loved having North Marion, and I was number 13, my favorite number. So you love having your school on your chest, and that did translate into being a television reporter. And then it translated into wanting to represent the state as Secretary of State and promoting the state in that aspect. So it really is, and I hadn't really thought about it as deeply as you're making me get into here as we discuss it. But it really is. I mean, it can't, like, and that's the thing. That's what I would tell young people or anybody else who, might be even evaluating their lives. It's like, what do I want to do now that I'm in my 50s? Well, what have you done before that can translate into that? I mean,
Going, oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go
No,
ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I even think about, because I just had somebody, Danny Jones, who former mayor of Charleston, former radio guy too, and he's like, you miss TV? And I said, well, yes, I do. I love asking those questions. And there's a lot of questions that I would love to ask that I was not smart enough or experienced enough back 25 years ago when I was doing the news, that how different I might be. And so, I often think about that, that's a possibility. Podcasts have opened things up that become possibilities for us who are people who are storytellers.
So let's take away sports real quick, and let's go in a much broader picture, and that is the whole state as itself. As a former basketball player, as a former Mountaineer, as a former journalist, and a former politician as well, where do you see the state of West Virginia needs to grow the most? That seems like a loaded question, but as I said in the beginning, you've worn a lot of hats, so I would like to hear your expertise in that.
And it's interesting, the political, proper answer would be, oh, we need to grow jobs. But what does that really mean? How do you grow that? I think it starts with growing attitudes too. And you talked about this, and sometimes you would think that we as West Virginians, we are very proud. we love our state. We would do anything for it, and we proudly display it no matter where you go. You can always, no matter where you go, and I've had the opportunity to be around the country and other parts of the world too. You find somebody who's always connected to West Virginia, always, no matter what. We all agree on that. And so we're very proud. At the same time, we're very, I don't know if fatalistic is the word. That could be pretty harsh, but we don't expect more sometimes. We don't expect more from ourselves, or we don't think that we're allowed to have more of ourselves to be able to be on that top rung. So, where could West Virginia, that's one way. We have to do it with attitude, and we have to be opening and welcoming to other ideas and other people. Like, here's another example. Speaking of basketball, I always use this analogy, and it's like with my dad, and it's kind of, people could describe it about many of their family members in West Virginia. Basketball game, WVU playing whomever, and it's it's going to be a tough game, and we're about 5 minutes in, and the other team gets 2 points ahead, and my dad's like, oh, well, there we go, we're going to lose the game. It's like, sometimes that's the attitude that we have. Like, no, we're only 2 points down, we got the rest of the game to go. And that's, we need to have that positive attitude for West Virginia, and take risks. It's hard for me. Like, you can see that I'm a risk taker, that I'm not afraid to step out and do something that hasn't been done before. But when you run state government, as I did for 8 years in the Secretary of State's office, it's hard to tell people I'm a risk taker and I'm going to take a risk in the Secretary of State's office, because they're like, what? Don't be doing that with our government, with our money. But sometimes you have to. I mean, and that's how we got a lot of advances that other states followed when it comes to elections and things like that. I mean, we could really get down in the weeds talking about that, but we have to sometimes let go of, we have to look forward. Like, I look at 3D printing. About 8 or 10 years ago, we had the Robert C. Byrd advanced manufacturing. It's still there over at Marshall. There's some of it at Bridgeport. We did lead the way on 3D printing back then. Well, guess what? Everybody has it now. It's not a new special thing anymore. And so that's what we need to say, yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do solar energy. Yes, we can have all the energy, the above energy, but sometimes we get too comfortable or get too afraid. So we hold on to what we've always known.
Well, I appreciate your insights throughout this whole episode. I think this was a great episode because we unpacked a lot, and
maybe too much.
Oh no, that's the beauty of a podcast. I mean, you just keep going and going. You're just like, oh my gosh, how much time do I have?
Yeah.
But I really do appreciate your time. Again, I loved all of your basketball stories, all of your stories in general, quite frankly, were just wow. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I love being on this. I think it's so good. I hope people listen, as they're driving down the road, or, even making dinner. Like, that's the way it gives me the opportunity. I just can't, I don't know if you're just sitting there, like, looking at the two of us, wow. But, if it were me, I'd be doing exactly. I'd be doing a couple other things.
Agreed. No, I agree. So
listen and look over at the same time.
Well, I hope you had fun. I mean, again, this was truly an awesome experience.
Well, I appreciate it. So I'm number 60 out of the
61. 61.
Oh, I'm 61. Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Absolutely.
All right. Anytime.
Well, again, thank you to Natalie Tennant for being our guest on episode 61 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Again, you can find me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And also another shout out to Alex Wiederspiel as well at U92 for allowing me to be on the airwaves of U92 The Moose. And you can listen to this podcast on U92themoose.com every Friday, I should say, from 9 a.m. until 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Get my words mixed up. You gotta finish strong. Anyway, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., that's when I'm on. I appreciate Alex again for this opportunity, and I will catch you all next time on episode 62 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Thank you all for listening, and stay safe.